They said Naomi Harris was just a worn-out ex-wife clinging to the last scraps of her former glory. A woman of color, cast out of Seattle's high society, left trembling with a cheap bottle of liquor, lamenting her failed marriage. They were wrong, because when Sienna Moore, the red-haired mistress with eyes colder than ice, first sank her claws into Naomi's family, she didn't just steal her husband. She carefully stripped away pieces of Naomi's life, her children, her friends, every last breath of dignity. But Naomi was not born to kneel. In the moment when it seemed she would break, she rose, clutching the silent vow every mother carries in her heart, that if needed, she would become the storm itself to protect Ethan and Layla. And now the only question is, how shattered will Sienna be when that storm finally hits? Where are you watching this story from? Comment below. And if you want to see Sienna get exactly what she deserves, hit subscribe and help us reach our first 2,000 followers. Because justice, sometimes, doesn't come on its own. It needs someone like Naomi Harris to bring it home. Naomi remembered the day the final court ruling echoed, cold as metal striking stone. She stood there in the blinding white hallway of King County Courthouse, hands trembling on her old handbag, listening to the giggles of Martin's team of lawyers. Their eyes brushed past her without pity, only boredom, as if looking at a waiter who'd ruined a dish at a lavish party. Martin shook hands with his attorney, draped his arm around Sienna, her striking red hair vivid against his tailored gray suit, making Naomi feel as if flames were sweeping through her chest. In the corner of the hallway, Naomi bit her lip until it bled, vowing not to shed another tear, because crying wouldn't save Ethan and Layla from the cold hands of a father now joined with a fox. Have you ever witnessed a wife being replaced so easily? If so, comment, "I've seen it" below. So Naomi doesn't fight alone. The house Naomi once called home was now empty, painfully silent. The photo frames along the staircase, Martin holding 3-year-old Ethan, Layla with an oversized blue bow, were now just fragments of memories trapped on the wall, proof that a family had once existed. Naomi rested her hand on the oak kitchen table, its grains still warm with echoes of mornings spent together, laughter swirling over cups of hot cocoa. Now only the ticking clock remained, pressing deeper into her hollow chest. One night, Naomi stood by the living room window, watching car lights fade down the street. For a moment, her reflection on the glass looked like a ghost, a wife left behind, waiting for something that would never return. If you've ever seen a house quieter than a graveyard, share in the comments. Because sometimes the loneliness of a mother is what kills her the fastest. Sienna Moore first appeared before Naomi at Ethan's basketball game, a perfect beige trench coat, heels gliding effortlessly over the cold concrete. The stadium lights seemed to bow to her arrogant confidence. Martin draped his arm around Sienna, whispered something that made her laugh, the delicate sound rippling through the stands. Naomi gripped the paper cup so hard the lid popped off, hot cocoa spilling over her fingers. But the burn was nothing compared to what scorched inside her chest. When Sienna turned, her eyes swept over Naomi. A brief look, cold enough to freeze her veins. As if she hadn't just taken Martin, but was calmly declaring, "I will take your whole world, and you will watch, powerless." In that moment, Naomi was no longer an ex-wife. She was prey. And Sienna? A hunter wearing a perfect smile. That evening, Naomi returned home, the dim hallway light casting her long shadow on the wall like a twisted question mark. She sat at the dining table, touching an old napkin still faintly stained with Layla's lipstick from her birthday. A tiny memory, yet sharp enough to tear her chest open. Her phone buzzed. A message from Martin. "Don't make things tense. Sienna is trying to get along with the kids. Don't make it awkward." Naomi read it again and again. Awkward? Wasn't Sienna the one who had barged in, tiptoeing into every corner of her children's hearts? In that moment, Naomi realized something chilling. She wasn't just fighting Sienna, but also Martin, the man who once swore he'd never let anyone replace her beside Ethan and Layla. The first crack had appeared, and Naomi began to fear what would shatter next. The next morning, Naomi opened her laptop to check work emails as usual. The inbox, once bustling, now held only a few promotional notices. Eerily quiet. Then one email caught her eye, the subject line cold and blunt. Unilateral termination of services. It was from CoreLogix, IntellectX's biggest client. Naomi read each word, sharp as knives. We have decided to terminate the partnership due to concerns over image and reputation. Image? Reputation? Naomi's hand tightened on the mouse, knuckles white. A chill raced down her spine, like someone had flung open a window and let snow pour straight into her heart. She looked up, around the small office that once rang with her staff's laughter, now utterly still. This wasn't just money, this was flesh and blood, the pride she'd clawed back after the divorce. Naomi gasped. Someone was peeling away her last layers of protection, from a woman who had already lost almost everything. And Naomi began to see that this war was more ruthless than she had ever imagined. Friday evening, Naomi had just stepped into the living room when Layla squealed, "Look, Mom, Miss Sienna bought me a new dress for the school dance." An emerald satin gown shimmering under the lights, so beautiful it hurt to see. Layla twirled, beaming, her brown eyes sparkling with innocent joy. Naomi swallowed hard, hiding her trembling hands in her pockets. "She said you're probably busy, so she'll help me pick out shoes too," Layla chirped. Naomi heard something inside her crack, not because of the dress, but because of how easily Layla spoke the name of the woman who had so cleverly wormed her way into every corner of the girl's life, as if Sienna had long earned the right to slip between mother and daughter. Naomi forced a smile, but deep in her eyes, a storm began to churn. Sienna didn't just want Martin, she wanted to strip Naomi of the most precious thing in her life. Naomi leaned against the kitchen counter, phone pressed to her ear. Martin's voice crackled through the speaker. Tired, distant, as if he were talking to a troublesome employee, not the ex-wife who'd shared his bed for over a decade. "You're blowing this out of proportion again. Don't be so sensitive, Naomi. Sienna just wants to bond, create a good atmosphere for the kids." Naomi let out a hollow laugh that echoed off the cold walls. "Sensitive?" As if she was imagining the looks Sienna threw her way, the honeyed whispers laced with venom. Martin went on, sounding even wearier. "I don't want more tension. Don't make me choose sides, Naomi." In that instant, Naomi realized he already had, and she, no matter how much it hurt, had to swallow back the sob clawing up her throat. Before the call ended, Naomi glanced at Layla's green dress draped over the chair, her vision dimming. This was no longer a scratch. It was a deep cut, signaling a battle Naomi never thought she'd have to risk her life to fight. Monday morning, Naomi walked into her usual cafe on Pike Street, once a place that welcomed her with friendly smiles. Today, those smiles were gone. She caught Rachel's eye, a mom from Ethan's PTA group, who immediately looked away, lips pressed tight as if afraid of catching something dirty. In the corner, two women whispered, occasionally glancing at Naomi, muffled giggles slicing through the air like knives. Naomi froze, her heart constricting. On a table by the window, a tabloid lay open, screaming in bold print, "Unstable ex-wife. Martin Caldwell's new girlfriend is saving the family." Naomi's hands shook, coffee spilling onto her dress, leaving dark stains. Her heart felt like it shattered, falling in tiny frozen pieces onto the tiled floor. This wasn't just gossip. It was Sienna's first scythe, hacking away the last scraps of respect Naomi still held in a community that once called her Mrs. Caldwell. That night, Naomi was clearing the dinner table when Ethan walked in, backpack still slung over one shoulder. He hesitated, eyes darting away, then blurted a question like a knife to his mother's heart. "Mom, is it true? You only married Dad for his money?" Naomi froze, gripping the dish towel until it crumpled. "Who told you that, Ethan?" Miss Sienna said, "Sometimes people have kids just to keep a man's wallet close. That's why you're upset. Dad found new happiness, right?" For a second, all sound vanished. No ticking clock, no cars outside, only Naomi's heartbeat roaring in her chest. She knelt, placing her hands on Ethan's shoulders, her gaze painfully searching her son, once so sure, now lost among sweet, poisonous words. "No, Ethan. I love you and Layla more than anything. Don't ever let anyone plant different ideas in your head." But Naomi understood. Once doubt takes root, it doesn't just drain life, it slowly kills even the purest love. Naomi sat across from the lawyer in a lavish office paneled with walnut wood, the soft yellow lights not enough to chase away the chill radiating from the italicized clauses on the table. He adjusted his glasses, voice steady as if reading out a criminal indictment. "Naomi, if they can prove you're unstable, even through tabloid rumors, custody of Ethan and Layla could be reconsidered." Naomi stared at the man who had represented her family for years, searching for a hint of sympathy, but found only the dry shrug of a legal professional. Here, money and image decide. Feelings do not. Outside the window, Seattle drowned in gray rain, each drop tapping the glass like tiny blades. Naomi clenched her hands, nails digging into skin until blood welled in red streaks. This was no longer about honor. This was about the mental survival of her two children, of herself, and Sienna was gaining ground with every step. That weekend, Naomi attended the fall festival at Ethan and Layla's school, still the devoted mother volunteer since the kids had taken their first steps. She wore an apron, forcing a smile as she painted butterfly designs on the cheeks of giggling children. Then Sienna appeared, in a buttery silk dress holding a stack of sponsorship forms, her eyes gleaming like someone bestowing blessings. The principal publicly thanked her for a $50,000 donation, his joyful voice echoing across the schoolyard. Naomi stood there, brush suspended in her hand, hearing Sienna's name announced for the third time. Behind her, the mothers who had once been close whispered, their eyes no longer stopping on Naomi. Instead, locked on the red-haired fairy, charming the children. And just then, Sienna turned. Their eyes met. A faint curl of her lips, not a friendly smile, but a victor's declaration, right in the middle of the crowd's applause. Naomi suddenly understood. This wasn't just a silent war. Sienna wanted the entire world to see who the real queen of this story was. The following week, Naomi walked into the PTA meeting, hand trembling slightly as she signed up for the Christmas program. She still hoped that here, within the oak walls of the school her children attended, the name Naomi Harris still carried weight. But then her eyes froze. Right above the line, primary sponsor, Sienna Moore Caldwell. That hyphen cut through Naomi's heart like a cold blade. Not just Sienna Moore, but Moore-Caldwell. As if Naomi's marriage had never existed, never left any trace beyond two children now slowly being pulled in another direction. Naomi looked up to see a once close mother smile awkwardly, avoiding her gaze. Outside the window, Seattle's heavy rain beat down on the awning like funeral drums. In that moment, Naomi heard no chatter, saw no familiar faces. Only the empty space beside her, where Martin once proudly rested his hand on her shoulder, now cold to the point of numbness. Thursday afternoon, Naomi opened her mailbox in a light drizzle. An envelope without a sender slipped out, edges soaked through. Inside were 4 glossy printed photos, the scent of fresh ink still sharp. Martin, smiling blissfully with his arm around Sienna at an elegant party. Sienna bending down to kiss Layla's forehead. Ethan shaking Martin's hand. Sienna standing close, her hand on Naomi's son's shoulder like staking a claim. The last one, all 3 of them cutting a cake together, the perfect new family. Naomi stood frozen, hands shaking so hard the photo edge sliced her finger, drawing blood. She clutched the pictures to her chest, breath shallow, heart squeezing as if someone had it in a vice. Have you ever seen someone try to erase every trace of you from the very story where you were once the central chapter? Tell Naomi she's not alone if you've ever been cruelly replaced like that. That night, Naomi sat on the living room floor, surrounded by the scattered photos like shards of glass. She no longer had the strength to get up, Her shoulders trembled. Tears slipped quietly down her chin, splashing on the cold tiles. Suddenly, Layla shuffled in from the dark hallway, wide eyes sleepy. "Mom, are you crying?" Naomi looked up, trying to hide the tears but too late. She opened her mouth, wanting to say everything would be okay, but the words caught in her chest. Only a hoarse whisper escaped. "I'm sorry, baby." Layla rushed over, arms wrapping around Naomi's neck, her tiny breath warming Naomi's hair. In that moment, Naomi hugged her tighter than ever, terrified that if she let go, Sienna would snatch Layla away instantly. In that trembling embrace, Naomi knew she couldn't allow herself to collapse. Even if blood dripped onto the floor, she would stand up again, because these two children were the last pieces left of the world that once belonged to her. The next morning, Seattle's sluggish sunlight streamed through the curtains. Naomi sat at the table, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee gone cold. Her eyes were red and raw, but no longer shattered. They had hardened, sharp as a blade honed on stone. She opened her laptop, typed the final lines of an email, and hit send. Addressed to Jared Lawson, a man known for digging up the deepest secrets of people who thought themselves untouchable. An hour later, her phone buzzed. Jared's voice rumbled, low and amused, like he'd found a hunt worthy of him. "Mrs. Caldwell, you want me to go to the bone on this woman, right?" Naomi drew a deep breath, her chest aching with the pressure on her heart. "Not want. Need. I need to know everything, to protect my children." On the other end, Jared gave a quiet laugh, the kind reserved for big, dirty reveals. Naomi placed a hand over her heart. For the first time in weeks, it beat not just from pain, but with a small spark. This war had finally, truly begun. 2 weeks later, Jared sent Naomi a thick black file embossed with the words, "Sienna Moore, Confidential." She opened it, her heart tightening as she scanned extracted emails, strange invoices, cash transactions under fake names. A labyrinth of paths Sienna thought no one could trace. There was a photo of Sienna meeting a sleazy PR guy in a downtown bar, slipping him a fat envelope. Text messages were clear. "Blow up her stress angle. Don't forget to dig for any antipsychotic prescriptions. Make the public believe Naomi Harris is a ticking bomb." Naomi clenched the file, nails tearing through the paper. The smell of ink mixed with the metallic scent of fresh blood from her fingertips. The scent of a battlefield, of a hunt, of someone cornered. For the first time in weeks of torment, Naomi didn't just feel rage. She felt something boiling, a dark thirst for justice fierce enough to burn Sienna to ashes if she could hold the torch right. A week later, Naomi sat on the wooden bleachers at the high school stadium, afternoon sunlight spilling over her hair like a ribbon of burnt orange. On the court below, Ethan shot hoops, while Layla sat beside Sienna on the opposite stands, head resting on that woman's shoulder, laughing brightly. Sienna wore oversized sunglasses, lips curled in a half smile. She stroked Layla's hair, tender as if the girl were her own. Their eyes flicked over to Naomi, just for a second, but enough to tear through the thin skin of a mother being replaced. Naomi gripped the bench rail, knuckles whitening. Every time her children laughed with Sienna, it cut deeper into her chest. But Naomi stayed seated, swallowing tears, swallowing the screams clawing at her throat. Because the cleverest fox is the one that waits. And Naomi had begun to learn how to wear a mask, so she could rip it off at just the right moment to drive the final knife home. On an early winter morning, heavy fog wrapped Queen Anne Street. Naomi sat in her usual cafe, hands curled around a mocha gone cold. At a nearby table, 3 unfamiliar women whispered, eyes occasionally darting her way, quick glances sharp as blades. "Heard she was once in a psych ward, needs heavy meds just to sleep." Naomi flinched slightly, heart tightening. Those whispers weren't loud, but they pierced the air, slipping all the way into her chest. She gripped her cup, afraid if she let go she'd burst into tears right there. Her phone buzzed. A message from Jared, only 2 lines. "Found it. The smear campaign IP paid by Martin's secondary card, handled by Sienna. Naomi closed her eyes, leaned back against the chair, tears slipping out but her lips curving up. Sienna had been too confident. She'd left a trail, and that was the spark Naomi needed to set all those vile whispers on fire. That night, Jared sent Naomi a compressed PDF file, shamelessly titled, Felicity Dunn, a.k.a. Sienna Moore. Naomi's heart pounded, blood roaring in her ears as she scanned old court records, notarized documents from a Texas courthouse. Felicity Dunn. No more, no illustrious lineage, no trust fund. Just the daughter of a man serving 12 years for charity fraud. Mother working night shifts at a laundromat outside Houston. A dirty little cocoon, wearing Seattle silk to drain sweet nectar from wealthy men. Naomi braced herself against the table, breaths short and broken. She stared at Sienna's old mugshot, dull brown hair, haunted eyes. Not a regal socialite, just someone once busted for credit card theft. Naomi's heart was both shattered and blazing, because this was no longer suspicion. This was proof, the kind that would slam Sienna face down before the entire world she thought she'd conquered. Naomi decided to play a daring hand. She invited Sienna over under the pretense of wanting to reconcile for the kids. Sienna entered the living room as if strutting down a catwalk, cold gray eyes glittering with triumph. She set her luxurious Italian leather bag on the table, crossed her legs, lips curling politely. "I'm so glad you finally want to talk, like mature women." Naomi swallowed the bitterness, forced a smile. "For Ethan and Layla, I'm willing. But there's one thing that needs to be clear." She slid her phone across the table, screen already playing a recording of Sienna whispering to someone over the line. "Once the wedding's done, those brats are out of my life. Martin's soft as mush. He won't dare argue." Sienna's face froze, eyes darting rapidly, breath catching in her throat. Naomi leaned on the table, voice low and slicing like silk torn by a blade. "You didn't just touch my ex-husband. You touched my children. And that's the hell line you just crossed." The battlefield flipped in an instant. Naomi was no longer prey. She had become the hunter. That night, Naomi sat alone in her small office, Jared's files spread across the table like black butterflies with folded wings. The warm lamplight fell over her face, hollow eyes now blazing with a rare kind of determination. Bank statements proving Sienna siphoned Martin's money, flirtatious emails seducing business partners to grease her schemes, old testimonies from victims in Nashville. It all formed a deadly maze Sienna had built with her own hands, now twisting into the noose tightening around her throat. Naomi pressed a hand to her chest, feeling her heart race, not from fear, but from hot blood surging back into her veins. She picked up her phone, typed a message to Jared. "Get ready, I won't give her time to breathe." Then, Naomi leaned back in her chair, closed her eyes, lips curving slightly. For the first time in months, her pain no longer bound her. It had become fire, the kind that would burn down Sienna's entire pretty castle of lies. 3 days later, Naomi's phone rang, Martin's name glowing on the screen. His voice came through tinged with awkwardness and hope. "Naomi, my birthday's coming up. Sienna really hopes you'll attend. I'd like us to show the kids this family is still civil." Naomi leaned against the kitchen cabinet, eyes lifting to the ceiling to stop the hot tears welling. She gripped the phone until her knuckles popped, then relaxed, her tone calm and even like a lake before a storm. "Of course. I'll come. And I've prepared a very special gift. One you'll never forget." Martin chuckled lightly, oblivious to the icy edge buried in every syllable Naomi uttered. "Great. I really appreciate how mature you've become." Naomi hung up, took a deep breath, then opened a drawer and pulled out the thick dossier Jared had prepared. Photos, bank records, witness statements, all sharp blades Naomi would lay on the banquet table. Martin's birthday. It would also be the funeral of Sienna's rosy little dream. The night before the party, Naomi sat at her desk, warm lamplight pouring over the thick stack of files spread across the wood. Photos of Sienna slipping envelopes to the PR man, records of money siphoned from Martin's funds, emails seducing client directors, all lined up like tiny tombstones waiting for Judgment Day. Naomi pulled out the last document, placed it gently on the pile. Felicity Dunn's birth certificate, bearing the name of her impoverished Texas lineage. Naomi's mouth drew tight, dark eyes gleaming with a strange light. Not pain, not fear, but a kind of resolve that bordered on dangerous. She whispered, voice dry yet burning, "Thank you for dragging me to the pit of humiliation, Sienna. Tomorrow, I'll personally rip you from your fake pedestal and toss you back into the mud you came from." Wind howled through a crack in the window, rustling papers with a ghostly applause. And Naomi? She sat there, serenely waiting for dawn, waiting for the moment to pull the final curtain on this play. The grand hall of the Seattle Art Museum glittered under crystal chandeliers, crystal glasses clinking like a choir of luxury. Guests in tuxedos and evening gowns floated past Naomi like a river of velvet, unaware that tonight they attended not just Martin's birthday, but also the sweetest execution this city would ever witness. Sienna stood beside Martin, radiant in a wine-red dress, giggling shyly when he bent to whisper. Her eyes flicked over to Naomi, lips curling in a smug reminder. "I've won. Look." Naomi merely nodded, fingers brushing the envelope in her clutch, her gaze no longer gentle. She drew a deep breath, heard jazz music soaring, pulling the entire room into a dizzy waltz. In that instant, Naomi felt weightless, because in just a few minutes, everything Sienna had painted over in rouge and glitter would collapse, right before the very faces of Seattle's elite she had longed to conquer. When the champagne pop signaled Martin was about to give his speech, Naomi quietly stepped onto a side stage, Jared's laptop in her arms. The spotlight swept over her, etching her calm face clearly among the sea of diamonds. "Before Martin cuts the cake, I'd like to give him a gift. The truth." A polite ripple of laughter echoed, then died as Naomi tapped a command. The giant LED screen behind her lit up, displayed, "Felicity Dunn, original record." A rustle of whispers rose. Sienna's old mugshot appeared, brown hair, frightened eyes, inmate number printed below. Then credit card statements, bribery emails to media, an audio clip of Sienna's shrill voice. "Once I've gotten it all, those brats are out of my life." Naomi turned toward Sienna. She stood frozen, face drained of color, lips trembling as if to defend herself. But the words drowned under a swell of scornful whispers, the crowd now staring at her with a mix of relish and disgust. A terrible silence enveloped the grand hall. Crystal lights still sparkled, jazz still drifted, but it all felt strangled, giving way to horror-struck stares fixed on Sienna. Martin slowly turned back, eyes locked on the documents flickering across the screen. Credit fraud, shady expenses, a clip of Sienna calling him that stupid old fool. His face went pale. The arm once loosely draped around Sienna's waist fell, as if realizing he'd been embracing a viper all this time. "Naomi, is this real?" Naomi simply nodded, her eyes not angry or triumphant, just deep as an abyss. "Read for yourself, or ask her." Sienna's mouth opened, about to protest, but from the crowd, phones were raised, flashes blazing. A sharp laugh cracked somewhere, then rippled into a wave of contemptuous whispers, sweeping through like a small storm. Naomi stood still, watching it all crumble, every brick Sienna had stacked now ripping itself apart. Sienna's high heels clacked erratically across the marble floor, staggering like someone drunk. She turned to Martin, hands trembling as they clawed at his expensive sleeve, her shrill voice splintering. "Martin, I can explain." But Martin jerked his arm away like it burned. His face blanched, eyes bloodshot with humiliation and rage. "Security!" Martin's voice rang out, dry as rotted wood. Two guards approached from the lobby. Sienna backed away, her wide red dress sweeping the floor, camera flashes popping wildly to capture every desperate move. "Martin, I love you. I did it all for us." Naomi stood nearby, tilting her head slightly, watching Sienna dragged off through the silent crowd, the light still glittering on the remains of her arrogance. In that moment, Naomi did not smile. She only exhaled, deeply, as if laying down the stone that had crushed her chest for months. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's quiet, but enough to crush the most beautifully decorated lies. Naomi stepped out of the museum, no one blocking her way, no more pitying eyes clinging to her. That night, Seattle was bitter cold, wind howling through the trees, but Naomi's chest felt light, as if she'd finally snapped the chains that bound her. In the parking lot, Ethan and Layla ran up. Their faces still stricken by the spectacle in the hall, but their eyes on Naomi were no longer doubtful. Layla threw her arms around her mother's waist, tiny tears soaking through her sweater. Ethan quietly stood beside them, then rested a hand on his mother's shoulder, giving a gentle squeeze. Naomi bent down, kissed their hair, heart swelling with sorrow and fulfillment. They didn't have to say anything, because sometimes justice isn't just about exposing the wicked. It's also to ensure what truly matters, like the warm embrace of these two children, continues to exist, with no ghost left to invade. Naomi drove slowly through Seattle's lamplit streets, Ethan and Layla asleep in the back seat, heads resting together in peace. She glanced in the rearview mirror, lips curving slightly. Not a proud smile, but the smile of someone who had reclaimed the most sacred thing: family. Wind streamed through a crack in the window, carrying the salty scent of the sea, reminding Naomi that every storm eventually clears, and love, real love, exists quietly, without need for fireworks. She whispered, almost to herself, "Sometimes, justice doesn't come on its own. Sometimes you have to stand up and become justice to protect what no one else can." Naomi drove deeper into the night, leaving behind the last ghost of her past. If this story made you think of yourself, or someone once teetering between loss and justice, subscribe to this channel now. Share this video to remind them some battles no one can fight for you, but you never have to fight alone.